There's a house on Long Island that used to look just like any other. Now it's a monument to silence.
11 bodies, mostly women, most of them young, left near Gilgo Beach like broken dolls someone got tired of.
The name that shook the headlines in 2023, Rex Heuermann. A husband, a father, a New York City architect. By day, he designed buildings. By night, it seems he was dismantling lives.
Heuermann was arrested in July 2023, charged with the murders of 3 women, Melissa, Barthélemy, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello, and suspected in several others. The bodies were found over a decade ago, but the man behind them hidden in plain sight for years. What kind of mind is that? What kind of man compartmentalizes so completely, shaking hands with clients, then binding women in secret?
It's tempting to call him a monster, a predator, and yes, he may be both. But here's the deeper question I've spent years chasing. What makes a child become a killer? Because I've sat across too many of them, those who smile like us, talk like us, but carry something frozen inside. And I've learned the darkness doesn't begin with blood. It begins in silence, in the corners of childhood, where no one looks, where a boy like Rex may have learned early on that people are disposable. And so we go back not to the crime scene, but to the cradle, to a place where love should have lived, but didn't. Because if we want to understand the man on the news, we have to meet the boy no one noticed. I picture him in a small room. The walls are dull. The air feels tight. There's the sound of dishes breaking in the kitchen again. His name is Rex, and he's 5. He doesn't cry when the shouting starts. He's already learned that crying doesn't help. It only makes things worse. His father is loud, rigid, quick to punish. His mother cold, passive, withdrawn like someone tiptoeing through a minefield. There's a teddy bear in the corner, one eye missing, stuffing leaking from the side. Rex used to hug it when he was scared. Now he just stares at it. He's not hugged back, not asked how he feels, not told he's safe. In that house, emotions are dangerous. Weakness is punished. Affection is rationed. So Rex begins to fold in on himself. He learns not to speak unless spoken to. He learns that his thoughts don't matter. He learns, most importantly, that love is earned only by being good. But good is never enough. There's a crack forming inside him, small hairline but growing. A child who is not mirrored learns to hide. And a child who is not soothed learns to detach. So he watches, memorizes tones, studies eyes, because if no one will connect with him, he will learn to predict them instead. That's the first shadow. Not violence, not blood, but emotional neglect, repeated, quiet, invisible. And as the door slams again outside his room, Rex doesn't flinch. He just wraps his arms around that broken teddy bear and begins to disappear. Was that the last time he cried? They didn't see him.
Not really.
To most teachers, Rex was just quiet, polite, average, never causing trouble.
But silence in a child is not always peace. Sometimes it's camouflage.
At school, Rex was the kind of boy who hovered on the edges. He sat alone at lunch, walked the halls with his eyes on the floor, and laughed when everyone else did, just a little too late.
The other kids called him weird. They whispered that he smelled funny, that he was off. One day they locked him in a janitor's closet. He didn't scream. He just sat there in the dark, counting the seconds, staring at the streak of light under the door. When the teacher found him, she asked why he didn't call for help. He said, "I didn't want to be a bother." He learned to vanish in plain sight, because every attempt to connect had a cost. So he stopped trying. He watched the boys who were loud and confident, how easily they took up space. He watched the girls laugh at their jokes.
And every laugh felt like a door slamming shut.
He began to resent them, not for being cruel, but for belonging to a world that never made room for him. He didn't want their friendship anymore. He wanted to escape.
And deep inside, in the place no one ever looked, something darker started to grow. Not just sadness, not even anger,
but the quiet belief that people deserved it. Was that the first time he imagined making them pay? Puberty didn't hit Rex like a storm. It was more like a slow distortion, like something already cracked now starting to twist. He began lying. Small things at first. Said he had friends he didn't. Said his dad took him fishing.
Nobody asked if it was true. No one cared.
And so the lies got bigger. He told a teacher he had a secret brother in the military, told a girl in gym class that he once saved a cat from a fire. It wasn't about the story, it was about the power. The momentary control over someone's attention, the fleeting feeling that he mattered. Then came the stealing. A pocket knife from the hardware store, a bra from his neighbor's laundry line. Not because he needed them, but because taking gave him a thrill, like reclaiming something the world had stolen from him. He started talking to himself, late at night, in mirrors, practicing how to smile, how to cry, how to look normal. Inside, he still wanted love, but love felt unreachable. So he settled for control. If he couldn't be wanted, he would be feared. One day, a kid shoved him in the hallway. Rex didn't react, didn't raise a fist, but that night he wrote the boy's name over and over in a notebook, then tore the pages into tiny even squares. He kept them in a shoebox under his bed, beside that old one-eyed teddy bear. He was still hiding, but now he was also planning. Was that the first time he felt pleasure from destruction?
By his 20s, Rex had learned the rules.
Shake hands, make eye contact, nod at the right moments, repeat what they want to hear, smile but not too much. He wasn't invisible anymore, but that didn't mean he was seen. He got a job, architecture safe, precise, distant. He designed structures, measured angles, obsessed over details. It was the perfect profession for someone who needed control, but feared being known. People called him smart, reliable, even kind. He dated, married, had kids, checked every box on the normal life checklist.
But it was a performance. Every gesture calculated, every word rehearsed. He mimicked emotions like blueprints structured, exact, sterile.
Inside there was nothing, or rather there was a storm, a growing bitterness that no one ever truly noticed, that the world rewarded masks over honesty, that love was for the charismatic, the beautiful, the loud. He tried to play the part, but behind the curtain he watched. Watched the women at the bar laugh at men who lied better than he did. Watched clients dismiss his ideas for flashier ones. Watched the world pretend it was fair.
So he adapted.
He learned to charm, to manipulate, to copy warmth he didn't feel, to become whoever he needed to be on command.
But late at night, after the house was quiet and the lights were off, he would sit alone in the garage, turning a screw over and over between his fingers. And he'd wonder, does anyone see the real man behind the glass, or was he just a blueprint no one ever finished?
It always takes one final crack.
One moment too sharp, too cruel, too perfectly timed. For Rex, it wasn't something the world would notice. It never is. It might have been a client who humiliated him in front of colleagues, or maybe a woman someone he thought cared who rolled her eyes and walked away, or his wife saying that cold sentence only someone who's tired can say, "Sometimes I feel like I live with a stranger," and that did it. The stranger she feared woke up. In that moment, something inside Rex collapsed and calcified, not with rage, but with resolve. The final nail in the idea that people could be trusted. He stopped pretending to believe in fairness, stopped trying to matter in the way others did. Instead, he told himself a different story. This world is cruel, and it deserves to feel what I've felt. The pain, the neglect, the invisibility. He began to prepare, not in a frenzy, but with cold, deliberate precision. He studied their routines. He planned the routes. He cleaned his tools. Not out of panic, but purpose. He wasn't trying to shock the world. He was trying to correct it, to make it feel just once what he had felt for years. And when he saw her, his first victim, he didn't see a person. He saw a mirror, a moment of control, a blank set of eyes that would finally reflect something back. And for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt inevitable. The moment didn't feel like murder. It felt like silence finally answering back. Rex stood over her, this woman whose name he barely remembered, and felt the strangest thing. Calm, not joy, not rage, just stillness, like a machine finally clicking into place. Her body was no longer moving. And for once, neither was the storm inside him. In that moment, he wasn't the rejected boy, not the awkward teen, not the ghost in the corner of the classroom. He was in control. Every breath in the room belonged to him.
He didn't tremble, didn't flinch, didn't run.
He stood there for a long time, listening to the stillness. Then, like it was routine, he began to clean. Careful, precise, practiced.
Because this wasn't random. This was architecture, a structure of control.
Each knot tied like a blueprint, each item wrapped like a diagram. And when he left her in the marshlands by Gilgo Beach, he didn't look back.
Because in his mind, this wasn't a tragedy. It was balance.
The world had mocked him, ignored him, used him. Now it would carry the weight of what it created.
And when he went home that night to his wife, to his child, to the man in the mirror, he didn't see a killer. He saw a craftsman.
And as he turned off the light and lay down to sleep, he whispered something no one would ever hear.
Now, we're even.
They say most first-time killers fall apart.
Not Rex.
He woke up the next morning, made coffee, drove to work, answered emails.
Like nothing had happened, because to him it hadn't. It wasn't an explosion. It was a solution.
But what came next surprised even him. Not guilt, not relief, hunger.
A craving he didn't expect. Not for violence, but for the feeling that came with it. That silence, that control. He felt more focused, more alive, more himself. He started to plan again, not out of impulse, but like a man building a second draft.
Fixing what he missed, refining his design, studying the gaps in his own work.
Because this wasn't a release, it was a routine. Each crime after was faster, colder, cleaner. Like brushing his teeth or drawing up blueprints. There were no voices in his head, no madness, just a practiced calm. And between the murders, he lived like anyone else. Coached his kids' team, shopped for groceries, said things like, "Have a good weekend."
But each night he was building a double life, brick by brick.
And with each body left by the beach, his real home came closer. It wasn't the one with the picket fence.
It was the one inside his head where he finally ruled.
And for the first time in his life, Rex felt free.
They came for him on a Thursday.
Suburban morning, coffee half drunk, laptop open. He didn't resist.
Just blinked.
As if someone had finally paused the performance.
Neighbors stared, reporters circled, and Rex Heuermann, the man who'd spent years hiding in daylight, was suddenly visible.
In the interrogation room, he didn't rage, didn't confess.
He sat calm, still eyes flat, like a man watching blueprints collapse.
But here's what haunted me as I studied those tapes. It wasn't the evil in his face. It was the emptiness, the absence of shock, the quiet calculation, the flicker of a thought. What detail did I miss? Even when they read him the names Melissa, Megan, Amber, he didn't flinch.
He just adjusted his glasses.
In the cell alone, he asked for books. A pen, he sketched, took notes. Even in custody, he was trying to rebuild something, trying to stay in control. But no one ever asks what a monster sees when the mirror finally cracks.
And I think in those quiet hours, Rex saw someone else.
A boy, alone in a locked room, holding a ripped teddy bear. Not a demon, just a frightened child still waiting for someone to say, "You matter." But no one came, and now it's too late. The man who learned to disappear will spend the rest of his life being watched. This story doesn't begin with bodies. It begins with a boy.
Alone, unseen, taught to swallow feelings like poison, taught that control is safer than connection.
And maybe that's what we always miss.
We look at the end, the horror, the names, the headlines, but we forget to look at the beginning.
We don't ask, what if someone had listened?
What if a teacher had noticed the way he flinched when the door slammed? What if a counselor had asked why he never spoke unless spoken to? What if someone had taken his silence as a scream? Would the story have ended differently? Would Melissa still be alive? Megan, Amber, we can't know.
But here's what I do know after decades of staring into the minds of the broken.
Monsters aren't born, they're built. In bedrooms full of fear, in schools that ignore the quiet ones, in families that mistake obedience for wellness.
This wasn't just a case of evil, it was a case of absence, of what happens when pain goes unanswered long enough to become a belief that the world deserves to suffer just like I did. Rex Heuermann didn't just take lives, he carried a life of emotional death long before the first body was found. And the scariest part, he's not the only one. Because somewhere right now, another child is learning that they don't matter.
And if no one sees them soon enough, They might just grow up believing it and act on that belief.
We must listen before it's too late, before silence becomes a scream no one can ignore.